yesterday, the Mueller report was released to magnificent fanfare, I would imagine probably around the world. The Mueller report, in many respects, was for all intents and purposes a dud. The media had been pushing this narrative that Donald Trump was somehow colluding with the Russians. The Mueller report did, for the most part, instantiate, at least from a mainstream opinion, that Russia had something to do with some kind of quote-unquote hacking attempt, or at the very least, let's say, an attempt to disseminate Facebook and Twitter ads in order to, I guess, confuse the American public. But the key thesis, however, that I don't want to get away from is this notion that the President of the United States was some kind of Manchurian candidate. And this was the thesis that the media has gone with for the last 3 years. Barr comes out and doesn't just put a knife in it. He puts a knife in it, stumps it, kicks the dead body, throws it in a grave, buries it, and have the entire grave transported into space in order to throw into the sun. Not so much on this point of whether or not Donald Trump tried to stop or hinder the investigation. More so about just the basic central thesis that the President of the United States was somehow colluding with the Russian government. That has been killed. Doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't going to be people trying to resurrect the dead body. I'm just saying it's been put to rest. But this doesn't necessarily exonerate Donald Trump. It doesn't exonerate him from the standpoint of all of these other cases that are against them, but just the very specific point of Trump and Russia. As Barr was putting a knife in this and getting it across in very clear and unequivocal terms that we had aggressive prosecutors looking into one facet after the next of Donald Trump's life, particularly within regards to this question of him working with the Russian government or people with him working with the Russian government, and we found no evidence to go with this notion that the president was somehow a Russian robot. But while he was saying this, he goes beyond that very basic point, and he gets into something dealing with WikiLeaks, and I would argue Julian Assange. It's a fascinating question. But he brings up what I strongly suspect is going to be what Julian Assange's case hinges on, meaning whether or not he's going to be extradited, one, and if he is extradited, whether or not a case against him can be sustained. As you know, Julian Assange was pulled from the embassy after being there for roughly 7 years. He was ejected when Moreno withdrew asylum for dubious reasons. One of those reasons seems to be to get assurances for an IMF loan, a loan that is the main guarantor being the United States, meaning the United States using the IMF as unconventional warfare. Listen to what Barr has to say here. I could be wrong here, but this sounds like this is going to be what Julian Assange's case hinges on, like I said. Whether or not he could be extradited, one, and whether or not, if he is extradited, a case against him can be sustained. Now understand, this is somewhat insane. Julian Assange is a publisher. He does what every other journalist does. Gets and pushes sources for information and puts that information up for the public to see. He filters the information. And I shouldn't have to say this again, but everything that he has ever put up has been found to be completely true. That's something that can't be said for our mainstream media. Let's take a listen to Barr and listen to what he's saying here about publishers and about how U.S. law is applicable in these terms.
Hacking. The special counsel's investigation also examined Russian efforts to publish stolen emails and documents on the internet. The special counsel found that after the GRU disseminated some of the stolen documents to entities that it controlled, DC Leaks and Guccifer 2, the GRU transferred some of the stolen materials to WikiLeaks for publication. WikiLeaks then made a series of document dumps. The special counsel also investigated whether any member or affiliate of the Trump campaign encouraged or otherwise played a role in these dissemination efforts. Under applicable law, publication of these types of material would not be criminal unless the publisher also participated in the underlying hacking conspiracy.
Did you hear what he said? This will not, essentially, under applicable law, it's not, and I'm going to replay it, but under applicable law, it is not illegal, providing the publisher had nothing to do with the hack itself. Julian Assange wasn't a hacker. Julian Assange was just a publisher. Even Tulsi Gabbard, who gave one of the best conversations on this, or the best full-throated defenses of Julian Assange, even made that point that, look, if he had something to do with the hacking, fair enough, but publishing information is not a crime. In fact of the matter is, publishing true information is not a crime. You have to ask the question, if the information is true and you're trying to criminalize somebody for publishing true information, what does it say about you and the things that you're trying to put out in the larger world? Julian Assange is not a hacker. I mean, if the case is going to hinge on that point, the problem here is that they're going after him not for legitimate reasons. They're going after him because he embarrassed the U.S. government. That's what it boils down to. By the way, this is not dealing with the DNC. This is dealing with Chelsea Manning's case. He embarrassed the CIA. He embarrassed the intelligence services. Donald Trump doesn't want to touch him because Donald Trump's association with the Russian government, meaning they've called Donald Trump a Putin puppet, and they've said that the link between these things was WikiLeaks. So when Donald Trump is asked about WikiLeaks, his response is, what's WikiLeaks? He doesn't want to touch it. He doesn't want to touch it. Either way, if the case is going to hinge upon Julian Assange being a hacker, if it's an honest case, which I'm skeptical of, because if it was honest, they would have never went after him in the first place. But if it's going to hinge upon Julian Assange being a hacker, which is what Barr just said, then the United States is going to have a hard time making that case. Let's hear. And by the way, whether they have a hard time making the case or not is almost irrelevant. 7 years of his life has been spent stuck in an embassy, essentially stuck in a small box. Whether they can make the case or not, they've damaged his life. And him standing up for this idea of putting out truth has taken a political toll. Let's listen to Barr one more time. I just want to make sure I'm hearing this correctly.
Law, publication of these type of dumps. The special counsel also investigated whether any member or affiliate of the Trump campaign encouraged or otherwise played a role in these dissemination efforts. Under applicable law, publication of these types of material would not be criminal unless the publisher also participated in the underlying hacking conspiracy.
I don't think he's saying that as a throwaway. I strongly suspect that either on a conscious level or subconscious level, he's aware that the United States is trying to extradite Julian Assange. In that extradition, he's also aware that hacking is the thing that they're trying to turn Julian Assange into, trying to make the point, oh, he's not a publisher, he's a hacker. So, Barr, conscious or not, brings this very particular point up as you can make a point, essentially clearing Donald Trump of these charges. So I thought this line was extraordinarily fascinating. And yeah, I think it's applicable to Julian Assange. He's literally talking about WikiLeaks. He's literally talking about whether or not something is a crime or not. And he's saying, in the context of the information being published, it's only a crime if the publisher had something to do with hacking. Julian Assange is not a hacker. But that seems to be where the United States is going to try to go with this. So I'll end this here. I didn't want this to be long. I just thought this was an interesting point that Barr made. If you guys enjoy this content and you find yourself coming back here often, please consider supporting the content through PayPal or Patreon. I will end this here, and I'll see you guys in a few. Thanks all. Bye-bye.